Things are not going well in the UK after Brexit.
We were expected to celebrate our independence as a sovereign nation today, not having to virtually start again from scratch. I feel very, very angry.
Now! Brexit now! Brexit now! Brexit now!
In 2010, 47% of UK exports went to the European Union, but by early 2024, after the UK left the European Union, this had fallen to 42%. After Brexit, the UK is now outside the EU's free trade area. British exporters now have to deal with much more paperwork, customs checks, and additional costs than before. But is it just red tape? No, it's not. Britain's economic structure has also changed. Less European labor, higher costs, longer waiting times. According to the Halifax House Price Index, house prices in the UK will rise by 3.3% annually, £297,166 in 2024. This makes the UK one of the countries with the most expensive average house prices in the world, behind Germany and the US. The growth rate of the UK economy slowed down after Brexit. In 2016, the UK was one of the fastest growing economies in the European Union. However, after Brexit, these strong days are behind us. By 2023, the UK was one of the countries with the weakest economic growth among the G7 countries. So what is the problem? Why has the UK lost its former strength? What happened after Brexit? Those who have visited the UK recently will recognize this change. Britain is no longer what it used to be. You see more people from different countries around the world on the streets than British citizens. According to the Office for National Statistics, the number of people coming to the UK in 2024 was 728,000. However, 479,000 people left the UK in the same year. In other words, a total of 1.2 million people entered the country in 2024. So why is the UK still short of workers despite such a high level of immigration? We will answer all these questions in this video. Why can't the UK economy recover? Your help motivates me a lot while making these videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel before watching the video. After Brexit, the UK wanted to reshape its economy and build an economy not dependent on the EU. However, in 2023, 42% of the UK's total exports went to the EU, and by the fourth quarter of 2024, exports to the EU amounted to £42.1 billion. On a sectoral basis, there was a big drop in the food and drink sector. Compared to before Brexit, there was a 20% decline. The UK's transition to third country status after leaving the European Union brought many challenges. New sanitary and phytosanitary controls and certification requirements have made exporting food and agriculture more difficult. UK companies now have to prove the origin of their products. This has led to additional costs and reduced competition. Such customs checks and the increase in documentation have burdened small businesses in the UK, both time and financially. For example, a small British cheesemaker used to be able to sell freely in any country in the European Union, but now pays an additional £2,000 in bureaucratic fees to sell in the EU. The European Union is still the UK's largest trading partner, even though exporting is becoming increasingly difficult for the UK. But rising costs are also causing the UK economy to slow down. After Brexit, the UK government has argued that it will not only stay with the EU as a single market, but will expand its trade relations and pursue free trade agreements. The UK government quickly began to replace the EU's vast network of free trade agreements. It signed new agreements with countries like Australia, India, and the US, and set about expanding the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement with a regional trade agreement for countries on both sides of the Pacific. First, the Ministry of International Trade was quickly established, and several free trade agreements, FTAs, were quickly signed in 2019 to 2020. On December 31st, 2020, when the EU leaves the customs union, the United Kingdom struck new trade deals in place of the European Union. The UK also signed entirely new agreements with Australia and New Zealand. But while these free trade agreements have been beneficial for the UK economy, the benefits have been insufficient. In general, these trade agreements should not be overrated, because the free trade agreements were actually copied continuity agreements. While London hoped to conclude a new trade agreement with the US after Brexit, no agreement has yet been concluded due to the US's ongoing protectionist mood. Looking at the numbers, the UK projects that by 2035, its trade deal with Australia will contribute 0.08% to GDP, while the New Zealand deal will make a long-term contribution of 0.03%. The CPTPP is expected to boost UK trade by £2 billion by 2040, but this amounts to less than 0.07% of the country's GDP. This is largely because the UK already has free trade agreements with many CPTPP members. By comparison, without Brexit, the UK economy would have been 5% bigger than it is now. This clearly shows how Brexit has not had a good impact on the economy. When we look at the import side, we can see that there is not a big change in the rates, but the rate may be the same. But the difficulties that companies face in going through these processes, that is the process of delivering the product to the consumer, have increased and continue to increase. One of the sectors that had the biggest impact on imports was the automotive sector. The signing of new customs duties difficulties with the EU has led to a shortage of automotive parts and production. After Brexit, car production in the UK fell by 29% to 920,000 to 928 units. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic also had an impact. Post-BREXIT uncertainty was one of the biggest factors, leading to a decline in foreign investors. For example, Honda closed its factory in the UK, leaving 3,500 workers unemployed. By the end of October 2024, car production increased by 16.7% to 751,422 units compared to the previous period. However, when we look at December 2024, these figures dropped from 64,000 to 216 units to 45,000 to 22 units. By January 2025, production fell 17.7% year-on-year to 78,012 units. This is the 11th month of decline on record. Can you see what the UK is going through? The UK has realized that it's not just them, it's the whole of Europe. The main reason why this was so was that most of the parts used to make a car were made in different countries in Europe and sourced from different EU countries. By 2025, average house prices in the UK continue to rise. In March, prices rose by 1.1% month-on-month, £371,870. The year-on-year increase was 4.8%, bringing the average UK house price to £291,000 in January 2025. In London in particular, the average price increased by 2.3% year-on-year to £564,000. In comparison, some regions are ahead in terms of house purchase prices. Based on city centres, the rent for a 1+1 flat in central London is 39.4% more expensive, at £1,039 in the UK and £745 in Germany. There are many reasons for these price increases. The most important one may be the imbalance between supply and demand in the UK. In 2025, 575,000 transactions are pending in the legal process, and new building construction is insufficient. 95,000 homes were sold in 2025, but these numbers were far below demand. One of the biggest problems after Brexit has been the increase in costs. Materials used in construction have increased by 30% in the last 5 years. This means that land prices account for 50 to 70% of the total cost, especially in areas like London and the southeast, further slowing things down. The government has also played a significant role in prolonging the construction process. On average, it takes 2 to 5 years to obtain any building permit. In addition, the artificial restriction of supply means that foreign investors continue to buy homes in luxury areas such as London. And another problem is the poor quality of products used in construction. This leads to 40% of housing being classified as low quality. There are also economic factors that affect house prices. For example, house prices in the UK are 44% higher than in OECD countries, and 76% of the income of the younger part of the population goes towards mortgage payments, which suppresses consumption and saving. Finally, companies cannot find people to work in the construction sector. Before Brexit, immigration policies were flexible and companies could easily find workers, but after Brexit, this ease has been replaced by difficulties. But when we look at it, immigration to the UK has increased. However, most of those who come here either come for education or are not satisfied with the wages paid by companies and do not want to work. The labor shortage has affected not only the construction industry, but also many other sectors such as the entertainment industry, agriculture, and animal husbandry. Finally, forecasts for 2025 show that prices could rise by 4 to 6% annually to £380,000 to £400,000. Demand will increase further if mortgage rates fall below 5%. We need to look at two things in terms of the inflation in the UK after Brexit. The first is monetary policy, and the second is fiscal policy. When we look at monetary policy, we already see that in the pre-Brexit period, the UK was not a member of the European Union with a strong central bank and monetary policies. Afterwards, there were some fluctuations in the pound, but this is not that big of a deal. Now, when we look at fiscal policies, there was a big deterioration in the supply-demand balance due to the increase in customs duties, the rise in energy prices after the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the excess aid provided by the state during COVID-19. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic were actually global problems. Brexit only made things a little more difficult. When we look at the technology side, it is perhaps one of the UK's strongest areas. The fact that the UK has pursued a better policy compared to EU countries, i.e. they're focusing on innovation instead of focusing on regulation, has resulted in startups from other countries flocking to the UK. As a result, these are the biggest reasons why the UK's economy has not recovered after Brexit. In summary, labor shortages, rising production costs, inadequate trade agreements, and global economic and political events have all contributed to the recession. There is a lot to talk about here, but time is limited. Your help motivates me a lot while making these videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel before watching the video. See you!